Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, alone in the studio one last time. Today is the 19th day of the month of Kislev, 5780, December 17th, 2019. Of course, we are broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And as I mentioned, I'm alone in the studio one last time. Next week, Ezrat HaShem, Rabbi Richman will be back with me, and we'll have lots to talk about together. This coming Shabbat, we read Parashat Vayeshev, and Yaakov dwelled in the land of his father's sojournings, Parsha which begins in chapter 37 of the book of Genesis. It's also Shabbat Mavarchin, meaning it's the Shabbat that we will be blessing the upcoming new moon, new month of the month of Tevet, which will actually be, the first of Tevet will be the following Shabbat. And of course, this coming Sunday night is the first evening, the beginning of the first day of Hanukkah, the 8-day festival of lights, which we celebrate the amazing victory of the Maccabean warriors who led the Jewish people against the Syrian Greek conquerors, invaders, and oppressors who try to uproot our faith, our religion, our code, our way of life, our who we are. They try to make it illegal and impossible for the nation of Israel to be the nation of Israel, for Jews to be Jews. And of course, the Maccabean family, the family of Mattatyahu and his sons led the rebellion, and we are celebrating the actually not the final victory, because it took many years to ultimately drive out the invading Greek armies, but the recapture and liberation of the Temple Mount, the purification of the Holy Temple and all the vessels, and the rebuilding and rededication of the altar, the great altar in the courtyard of the Holy Temple, because it had been, like everything else, impurified and had to be taken apart, disassembled, and a new altar had to be replaced. And of course, we are also celebrating the miracle of the single flask, cruse of oil, pure oil, the only cruse of pure oil that was found, the seal hadn't been broken after the Maccabeans returned to the Holy Temple. And although it was only enough oil to light the menorah for one day, miraculously the candles stayed lit for 8 days until new pure oil was produced and could be used to continue the daily commandment to light the lights of the golden menorah which stands in the Holy Temple. Now, there's lots to talk about concerning Hanukkah. I'm going to be I'm going to go a little bit light on Hanukkah this week because I have so many other things I want to talk about. And next week when the rabbi is with me, we will have lots to talk about. By that time, it will be the third day of Hanukkah. So we'll be right in the thick of it, and we'll have lots to talk about. I'd like to focus, at least for most of today's show, on this week's Parashat Vayeshev, a fascinating Parsha. It's the beginning of the most amazing story ever told. You might say, well, what? The Exodus is the most amazing story ever told. Well, okay, I'll grant you that, but this is an amazing story. The story, of course, of Yosef and how he ended up in Egypt and how the brothers ended up in Egypt, and the whole story which will bring us to the conclusion of the book of Genesis and set the stage for the Exodus. But it's an amazing story, so many twists and turns, so many ups and downs, so many highs and lows, so much humanity, so much human behavior, jealousy and deception and regret and remorse, and of course ultimately confession and forgiveness. It's an amazing story which you read it every year. You might read it 10 times a year, but for me personally, it never fails to grab me and just keep me entranced. And I laugh, I cry. It never fails to take me away with it. But it's also fascinating because there's so many questions, so many things we can ask along the way. Why did he do this? Why did he do that? Where did this person come from? What's this all about? And because there's so many questions, there's a lot of midrash, a lot of midrashic literature, which fills in and answers questions by posing other questions, really. It's very, very fascinating. So I'd like to focus on some of those midrashim in this week's show. We open up, again, Parashat Vayeshev, chapter 37. We're in the first verse, book of Genesis, chapter 37. Yaakov settled in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. Okay, we're told he just wanted to settle down now, right? He had been all around. He had done his time. He had paid his dues. He had his ups and downs, lots of trials and tribulations. He's ready now. He's ready to settle down. His sons are all growing up. The oldest ones we'll find in a minute, are out shepherding the sheep. It's time for him to rest and just land and just settle and make a home in the land that his father's land that was promised to him and his children. But as we find out, it's not going to happen. And as our sages say, the righteous, they get a reward in the world to come. So why should they expect peace and quiet in this world? Okay, obviously in the case of Yaakov, he was not going to get any peace and quiet until, of course, he would enter into the world to come. Until his final days, he had troubles, as we'll learn later in the book of Genesis. But continuing with verse 2, these are the chronicles of Yaakov. Yosef, at the age of 17 years, was a shepherd with his brothers by the flock. But he was a youth with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. They were the two handmaidens, the maidens of Leah and Rachel. And Yosef would bring evil reports about them to their father. Okay, so here's the first question. He's out in the field. He's out playing. He's spending time with, specifically it says, the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah. And he brings in evil reports. So the question is, what was this evil report? Dibah. It's the same word used when the spies spoke evil about the land of Israel. We learned in the book of Numbers, that great sin of the spies. It's also known as a dibah. They spoke ill of the land of Israel. And here he's speaking ill of his brothers. What's it all about? What's he saying? So there is a midrash. And the midrash goes like this. What was he saying? He was saying that they were eating Ever Minachai. Ever Minachai literally means the limb of a living animal, which we know from Noach, that one of the laws that God gave to Noach was you're not allowed to eat a limb of an animal. You can't eat an animal alive. You can't cut off a part of an animal while it's alive and eat it. Apparently, it was something that was done at one point. Otherwise, it wouldn't have to be forbidden. But of course, it sounds like a horrific crime. And so Yosef is accusing his brothers of such a horrific crime, such inhumanity, such cruelty. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. Here's the story. There's a halacha in the Gemara, in the Talmud, great length. It talked about this halacha. If you slaughter a cow the proper way, according to halacha, according to Jewish law, it's a kosher slaughter, and you discover, I hope this isn't too gruesome for some people, but I'll go over it quickly. If you discover, but it's very fascinating, if you discover once you've slaughtered that cow that there was an unborn infant inside the cow, do you need to slaughter that as well according to the laws of kashrut before you can eat it, or was it considered part of the first slaughter? Okay, it's a very interesting, put it that way, idea. Okay, so what our sages concluded was that you do not need to slaughter this unborn cow separately. It's considered part of the original slaughter. Okay, so that's the halacha, and again, this is a midrash, and according to our sages, this is what Yosef was holding by. This is how he understood it, and so what he was reporting to his father, according to midrash, was that there was an argument, and the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah both said, no, you need to slaughter that infant, unborn cow separately. So again, nobody here is cutting off limbs of any animals. God forbid. It's a very academic argument, but a very heated discussion apparently. So Yosef is reporting this. That's the deba according to Midrash. It's very interesting. Why that? I'm not quite sure, but very interesting. I'm just going to skip ahead. There's a beautiful lecture. You can find it on YouTube. It's in Hebrew by a rabbi named Yossi Ziv. And he's talking about the Ethiopian Jews who are from the tribe of Dan. And Dan was the first of the two sons born to Yaakov by Zilpah, the handmaiden of Leah. So he was the fifth child of Yosef. He was born right after Yehuda, but he was a child of Zilpah. And the Ethiopian Jews in Ethiopia had developed their own halakha, which was ancient because they separated from the rest of the tribes of Israel already back in the times of the first temple. So their traditions go 3,000 years, and they're different from the traditions that have developed for the past 3,000 years among the rest of the Jewish tribes. So fascinatingly enough, according to the ancient tradition of the Ethiopian Jews who are from the tribe of Dan, they hold that if you slaughter a cow, kosher slaughter, and you find inside an unborn cow, you need to slaughter it as well. That's the disagreement. And their disagreement, their stand on this, suggests that this has been their tradition for 3,000 years, and this is a tradition that they got from their ancestors who were the children of Dan, who was the son who was part of this dispute. So here you have what you might call, halachic archaeology, discovering the past, not through archaeology, but through two different 3,000-year-old traditions about how to properly slaughter an animal. Anyway, I just find it to be a fascinating point that this issue, which was a very, very hot issue, it wasn't just an academic thing. It was, it was my way or the highway kind of thing, to the point where Yosef would go back to his father and say, they can't do it that way. They have to do it this way. Again, this is a midrash, but it reverberates. It seems to resonate in our history that there was actually an ancient difference of opinion, which we can trace all the way back from the reality that we're reading about in the Parsha to the reality that we've discovered here in modern times. Then, I'm going to move along now. Then, of course, Yaakov sends Yosef to... He gives him... He makes him this tunic. He makes him his ketonet pasim. This as it's translated here in the Stone translation, fine woolen tunic. In Hebrew, it's a ketonet pasim, seemingly a striped tunic. And it was clear that to his brothers that the father loved them most. He was the son of his old age, and so they were already They were jealous of him. And then he began to dream dreams. Okay, he had the dream that everybody is harvesting wheat, and his brother's piles of wheat all bound out to his, and then he has another dream with the stars. Everyone's bowing down to him, and he doesn't win any friends this way. His brothers are even more angry than before. Then, and it says after that, very important what it says, his father gets upset with him for the second dream. So do you think that me and your mother, who is no longer, and your brothers are all going to bow down to you? And then it says in verse 11, it says, in verse 11, his father kept the matter in mind. Okay, his father, Shemata Devahi, his father saw that the brothers were angry, and he kept it in mind. But then immediately afterwards, Yaakov sends Yosef to check up on his brothers who are out in Shechem. Now, Yosef and his father and his younger brother, Benjamin, are all living in Hebron. Hebron's toward the south of Israel, and Shechem is toward the north. So it's a long journey. And obviously the brothers have been there tending flocks for a while. And this, of course, is in the area of Shechem, where they had the whole confrontation with the residents of Shechem and slaughtered them all. So obviously they're up there, and they're somewhat notorious in those parts. And Yaakov wants Yosef to go and check up on them, see how they're doing. Very interesting. He didn't think that it might not be a good idea. Maybe his brothers wouldn't welcome him since they had such antipathy toward him. They were jealous of him. And why did he want to check up on them? Did he not think they were capable? We don't know. We don't know why he sent him. And then, of course, you get the very curious story how Yosef is looking for his brothers, and he seems to lose his way. And again, verse 15, a man discovered him, and behold, he was blundering in the field. Yosef he didn't know where he was going. The man sees this, takes note, and asks him, saying, "What do you seek?" And he said, "My brothers do I seek." It's a very beautiful verse. My brothers, I seek my brothers. I'm looking for my brothers, which is touches on the real theme of the whole story, and I think a major theme of the entire book of Genesis. Brothers, the first brothers that appear in the book of Genesis, one murders the second. Later on, we have two brothers born to Abraham, and they can't live together. And later on, we have two brothers born to Yitzchak, and there's a tension between them. In order to move on, in order for God's plan for the world to unfold, first things first, brothers have to learn to get along. It's basic. So he's looking for his brothers. Tell me, please, where they are pasturing. The man said, they have journeyed out on from here, for I heard them saying, let us go to Dotan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dotan. So who is this man? Why did Yosef get lost? That's a detail that we don't know, why he got lost. He didn't have GPS, he didn't have Waze, but why did he get lost? He could have just gone and found his brothers. But anyway, who is this man? We don't know. Midrash tells us it was the angel Gabriel. God placed there in order to direct Yosef to his brothers. So, leaving aside the question of why Yosef got lost, we see that God is intervening, according to Midrash. God is intervening to make sure that Yosef will find his brothers, to make sure that things will proceed as God wants them to proceed. It's very interesting. Ultimately, what God wants is for all the brothers to end up in Egypt, because this is what God told Avram was going to happen. Your children are going to be in a country that's not theirs, and they're going to be enslaved. God has to make this happen. So God is intervening, it seems, in order to force history to occur as God said it was going to occur. It's very fascinating, I think. Then, of course, Yosef comes upon his brothers, who see him first and come up with this whole plan. And they want to kill him. And then Reuven says, we can't kill him, he's our brother. Let's just put him in a pit. And we'll Reuven figures he'll come back later and rescue him. And, they'll get past it. The incident will be behind them. So that's what they agree. Okay, we'll put him in a pit. So they put him in a pit, and then they see a caravan in the distance, and we'll see. Oh, they put him in a pit. This is another fascinating detail. Then they sat down to eat. Okay, they have so much hatred and anger directed at their brother that they're putting him in a pit. They decided at the last minute not to kill him. Okay, we won't kill him, But they put him in a pit where if they don't rescue him from the pit, he'll die. It won't be active murder, but he'll die. And then they sit and they eat a meal. Now, we know that the 12 sons of Yaakov, Jacob, Israel, are all righteous people, right? They're the most righteous people. Okay, we're not forgetting that, but we still are asking these questions. Will they sit down to have a meal? That just seems cold, very, very cold. So they sit down to have a meal, and then they raise up their eyes, and they see, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilad, their camels bearing spices, balsam, and lotus, on their way to bring them down to Egypt. And Yehuda said to his brothers, what gain will it be if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. But let our hand not be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. Okay, so now he's the hero. He's come up with a solution. And they're going to sell him. Okay, so they sell him. Now, then they sell him for 20 pieces of silver. And then Reuven returns. Apparently he wasn't here during that whole transaction. He returns and, his brother's gone, and he goes into a panic. He doesn't know what to do. And here's the music. Hold on to your seats. I'll be right back, and we'll continue this story. Temple Talk. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven. Today is the 19th day of Kislev, 5780, the 17th of December 2019. Rabbi Richman will be, God willing, back with us next week, and we will broadcast our Hanukkah Temple Talk next Tuesday, the two of us together again. This coming Shabbat is Shabbat Mavarchin, meaning it's the Shabbat that we bless the upcoming new month of Tevet, which will be the following Shabbat. And this coming Sunday evening is the first night of the 8-day celebration of Hanukkah. And of course, Hanukkah is the only holiday on the Jewish calendar that spans over 2 months, because it begins in Kislev and it ends in Tevet. And this coming Shabbat will be the 6th day of Hanukkah, and Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month of Tevet. We have been talking about Parashat Vayeshev, and I left you all on a real cliffhanger. The brothers sold Yosef to the Ishmaelites after they decided that there was no gain in killing him, when they could gain 20 pieces of silver for selling him. And Reuven returns, because he was the one who came up with the first idea of saving his life by putting him in the pit. Okay, and now he's back. Apparently, we don't know where he went or why. Again, another mystery. Torah doesn't tell us even that he went. All of a sudden, we learn that he returned. And he returned and he doesn't know what's happened. He doesn't see Yosef. Now, after that, we learn that the brothers, killed the lamb and soaked Yosef's coat in the blood. I don't know, personally, maybe you know. I don't know if the brothers told him what happened. I don't know if Reuven knew that Yosef wasn't dead until Yosef revealed himself to them in Egypt. I don't know if he was let in on what they had done. It's not clear to me. I'm very curious about that, but I haven't seen an answer to that. There might be that question might have been asked and answered somewhere in our literature, but I haven't seen it. But what's interesting is that Midrash goes to tell us, now the brothers, when they decided to sell Yosef, it was a decision that, Midrash understands it as it was like a legal decision. So for that, they needed a 10 people, like a minyan, 10 people to establish a Beit Din, a court of justice, so they could decide this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be official. So since Reuven wasn't there, they only had 9. So according to Midrash, you have to understand Midrash is not meant to be literal. It's meant to convey an idea, convey meaning to something, to give another layer of understanding. So according to Midrash, because there were only 9 brothers, because Yosef is one being sold, and Binyamin is back with his father in Hebron, and Reuven's off somewhere, we don't know where, that leaves 9. So they're missing somebody. They need a 10th man, just like to pray in a minyan today, to pray in a quorum, you need 10 people. They needed a 10th man to make this Beit Din, this court of justice, so that they could approve of this, this new initiative to sell Yosef. They only had 9. According to Midrash, God himself somehow appeared and voted with them to sell Yosef. This is a fantastic, crazy concept. Again, not to be taken literally. But what I believe our sages are trying to convey is, again, what we mentioned before. This had to happen. God had to get the ball rolling here. He had to get Yosef in Egypt somehow. And so, if events weren't going to take a natural turn here, God had to, here and there, just like in the case of this man in the field who helped direct Yosef to his brothers, just like perhaps why did Yaakov all of a sudden send Yosef in the first place, etc., all these different questions. It had to happen. God had to make it happen in order that the Jews could go down to Egypt, in order that they could become a great nation in Egypt, in order that there could be the exodus from Egypt, in order that there could be Torah at Mount Sinai. It was all part of this plan, and God had to kickstart it. So he did what he had to do. He, according to Midrash, he turned the knobs that had to be turned, and pulled on the levers that had to be pulled on in order to make all this happen. I just find the whole story to be so fascinating, even without the Midrashic interludes, explanations. It's just such a fascinating story. On the one hand, we have God's intervention, at every nook and cranny. On the other hand, it's just teeming with humanity, with the foibles of humanity, man's imperfections, man's weaknesses, all these emotions. It's so crazy. And then there's one more midrash I'll share before we move on to another part of the story, and that is, the question is now, the midrash comes to answer, what did the brothers do with the 20 pieces of silver? So they say, and I believe it's based on the prophet Hosea, who said, for 20 pieces of silver you sold the righteous for a pair of shoes. And they say they sold Yosef, and they all went out and bought shoes. So, first of all, it's a horrible thing what they're suggesting, what the Midrash is suggesting. It's a horrible thing. They were so cold-blooded that they didn't have any remorse. They didn't think twice about it. They sold them. Okay, we're done with that pain in the neck. Now let's go buy some shoes. The question then is, why do they want shoes? There's also another scenario that pops in my mind. Here they were in the fields around Shechem, the city that they had destroyed, and all the other neighboring cities and villages. They knew who they were. It was like a Western. The bad guys. They're tough guys. Like everybody else is, wary of them. It's recent history that they destroyed. They killed every last member, every last man of Shechem. So now they're going to go downtown, somewhere, maybe Shechem, maybe somewhere else, and walk into a local cobbler and order 10 pairs of shoes. Wow. I can imagine, like in a Western, everybody who sees him coming runs and hides. They lock the doors, they close the shutters. The Israelite brothers are coming to town. Anyway, that's my little imagination. But why do they want shoes? Perhaps, and I'll leave it with this, perhaps from the moment they sold Yosef, they were in the land of Israel, and this is holy land. Maybe their feet were burning. Maybe all of a sudden, that land was speaking to them and saying, you can't walk on me. You can't walk on this holy land after what you've done. So maybe they bought the shoes because they could no longer bear the burden and bear the accusation. The land knew what they had done. Just like the land cried out to God, when Hevel killed Cain. Well, when Cain killed Hevel, when Cain killed Abel, God said, the land's crying out to me. His blood is crying out to me from the land. So I believe that what this Midrash might be trying to tell us is that from the moment they sold him, they got the message quickly, even before they went and told their father and told him the whole lie and then tried to comfort their father. They obviously didn't think that it was going to affect their father so greatly, but they tried to comfort him, desperately tried to comfort him, and they couldn't. From the moment they sold him, the Midrash is telling us that things started to go wrong for them. They understood that this was like a horrible thing they had done. Yes, on the one hand, Midrash is telling us this is exactly what God needed to happen, one way or the other, but at the same time, it was a crime that they had committed that was going to not only burn the soles of their feet, but burn through their consciousness, their hearts, their beings for the next 20 years until they finally meet Yosef and confront their guilt and admit to their guilt. And only then is there some closure. And they can move on to the next chapter in the history of the nation of Israel. Our Parashat Vayeshev, which we're reading, then after Yosef sold, he sold to Potiphar, etc., etc., and then cuts, of course, to the story of Judah, and his 3 sons, and the wife, and the son who died, and the other son who refused to father a son through the first son's wife, even though that is the law of Yibum, which was a practice apparently in the time of Yehuda, and it was a practice, and it's in our Torah, it's one of our commandments, that if a brother dies sonless, childless, then another brother, I believe that brother is unmarried, then needs to marry the widow in order to have children that will be part of the first brother's, the deceased brother's heritage. So the second brother didn't want to do that, and the third brother, Yosef, was too young. He told his daughter-in-law Tamar to go back home, and when the younger brother grows up, he'll let her know. But he never did, of course. For the whole story, she dresses up as a prostitute when she hears he's coming, and they sleep together, and there's a son. She's pregnant. Yehuda wants to kill her because she's become a prostitute, and then she becomes clear that it's his son, etc., etc. And of course, the son that is born, there's 2 sons born, and the one son, Peretz, he will become the great-great-great-grandfather of King David HaMelech, Mashiach, the savior of the people of Israel, our greatest king. And from this very, 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 very humble beginning, the line that will become the line of David begins. And it's a very fascinating line because, of course, later on there will be Ruth, who was a Moabite, will become King David's grandmother. And, of course, the Moabites are descendants of Lot and Lot's daughter, another very questionable relationship there. And, again, we learn from all this that King David became the epitome of the greatest Jew, the greatest human, because his roots were so low, so humble that he was not above anybody. His words, his deeds, his psalms are inclusive of the entire gamut of humanity, because nobody came from a more humble beginning than he did. And so as he rose up to his greatness, he was bringing a part of everybody to that potential as well. So that's the beginning of the line of David. We learn that also in this Parashat Vayeshev. Then it goes back to Yosef, and he's accused of raping the wife of Potiphar. Horrible story. He goes into jail. He meets there the two servants of Pharaoh, the one who's in charge of the beverages and the one in charge of the bakery. And we know the whole story. They each have a dream, and one gets placed back on Pharaoh's birthday. Very interesting detail as well. On Pharaoh's birthday, he recalled the Sarah Mashkim, the servant to the cupbearer, and recalled him back to his service to help him put on this celebration he's having. And the baker, gets hung, just as Yosef said it would happen. Of course, Yosef asked the cupbearer to remember him to Pharaoh when he gets back to Pharaoh's house, because he was unjustly taken from his land. He's a Hebrew and he doesn't deserve to be in this prison. But of course, the final words of the Parsha are that the cupbearer did not remember Yosef and he forgot him. Very interesting, this double language, did not remember him and forgot him. So that very slim chance of being released from prison slips through Yosef's hands. In the meantime, another aspect of this week's Parsha is that it's dealing primarily with Yosef and secondarily with Yehuda. And as we know from our history that after the reign of King Solomon, the kingdom of Israel would be divided, and it would become the kingdom of Judea in the south and the kingdom of Israel in the north. And the kingdom of Judea in the south, whose capital was Jerusalem, where the Mikdash was, the Holy Temple was, which comprised of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, who was located right next to Judea. In fact, the temple partly built in the tribal inheritance of Benjamin. And the other northern tribes will become the kingdom of Israel. And of course, the seat of power of the northern tribes will be the inheritances of Yosef's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So basically, the northern tribe is a Josephian lineage, and the southern kingdom is a Judean lineage. So you have this dichotomy already showing up now in this week's Parashat Vayeshev of the line of Yosef and his leadership abilities, which we'll see very, very clearly as we continue, and Yehuda's leadership abilities, which at this point, other than his great idea to sell Yosef instead of killing him, they haven't really been revealed to us. Yes, what has been revealed is that when his daughter-in-law Tamar fingers him as the man she slept with, he admits that she is right and that he was wrong. And of course, he calls off the execution and he takes responsibility for the children that she's fathering. So we learn from that about Yehuda that the source of his greatness is not his ability to read dreams or to organize Pharaoh's house or the prison, or even, I was going to say Potiphar's house, or the prison, or even Pharaoh's house, as we'll see. But the essence of his greatness was in his ability to admit an error and fix it. His ability to ask for forgiveness. And we'll see that, of course, is one of the great qualities, the redeeming quality of King David, that he was able to own up to his mistakes, which he made, and ask for forgiveness, and act in a way to correct that mistake. And of course, we'll see that again when the brothers meet up with Yosef in Egypt, and he reveals his identity to them. Then we'll see that Yehuda is the main speaker on behalf of the other brothers who finally fess up and own up that they did a bad deed, and they ask for Yosef's forgiveness. All this in this week's incredible reading of Vayeshev, which begins again, and Jacob just wanted to settle down. He just wanted to settle down and live a life in the green pastures of the land of Israel, and boom, it wasn't going to happen because a whole lot of history had to take place before Israel could settle down in the green pastures. And you know what? That history is still taking place today, which leads us to today's events. As you all may know, Israel's gearing up now for its third election in a year, because the election results in our system have not produced results that our politicians can agree on making a coalition out of, which is very unfortunate. And so there'll be new elections, and everybody is predicting that we're going to have pretty much the same results and the same logjam. So somebody's got to give. Somebody's got to step up to the plate. Somebody's got to do it'll be like Yosef and his brothers, meeting each other after 20 years. Somebody's going to have to reveal who they are and what they're made of, and take the reins of leadership and lead Israel on. So yes, thousands of years later, we are still not yet able to just settle down and take it easy here in the land. We've got lots of things going on. We've been talking in recent times about the Temple Mount and what's transpiring there, what's unfolding. The fact that organized prayer now is tacitly accepted by the police on the Temple Mount. It's organized. It's done in a very modest manner, but it is out loud. It's audio, and we've shown some videos of it happening. And it seems to be a new policy, although nobody is admitting to it. On the other hand, there are three young men who, before Yom Kippur, a few months ago, were on the Temple Mount, and both said out loud, they all said out loud, the Shema Yisrael, were indicted yesterday. They had been arrested by the police at that time, and they were in court yesterday and were indicted for disturbing the peace. So they are going to fight that, of course, and it's an insane, outrageous idea that a Jew, frankly, anywhere in the world, can be arrested for disturbing the peace by saying the Shema Yisrael, and that certainly in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel, and certainly in the Temple Mount, it's outrageous. And hopefully that outrage will be noted by the judges, and they'll throw the whole thing out. So yes, contradictions here, aren't there? And it's been that way for a while, and I'm sure it's going to be that way for a while. The Israeli official government policy is still very contradictory, and the only thing I can say that might clear up some of the confusion here is that it would seem to me, by what I can see, is that the prayer that is now not being contested by the police is something that has been discussed between the police and between Jews that go on the Temple Mount. It's an agreed upon thing, and so anything beyond that, if you do any act of prayer or identity of being a Jew, beyond that, you may still be arrested. So it's kind of a crazy twilight zone that we're in right now, but certainly it's very encouraging because we seem to be heading in the correct direction. Another interesting thing is that this week a number of, paratroopers who 52 years ago liberated the Temple Mount in the Six-Day War, returned as a group to the Temple Mount. And there they, posing in front of the Dome of the Rock, not in the area that is forbidden, but past that, but the Dome of the Rock is behind them, holding up an Israeli flag, which of course has also been something that's been forbidden for many, many years. I'm sure it was also an agreed upon gesture, but it's a positive step just the same. Here's the music. It's been great. I'm going hoarse. Can't wait till the rabbi gets back. Thank you for being with me. Temple Talk.